بالتعاون مع المندوبية الجهوية للتربية بتطاوين، إذاعة تطاوين تقدم اذاعة الباكالوريا. اذاعة الباكالوريا اليوم مادة الانقليزية مع الاستاذ الحوات.
Good evening to everybody. Good evening to all Tataouine radio listener. Good evening to all students. Good evening to all back students. Today is Thursday, March the 5th, 2020, and you are listening via Tataouine radio waves to a program broadcasted in English language and presented by Mr. اليحياوي and Mr. الدين اليحياوي. You are welcome again, and I hope you will enjoy listening to us and you get some benefits. As we know, all the students are now carrying on the exam of the second term of this school year 2019-2020. I think that all the students are ready and are doing their best to deal with all the exam subjects. I would like to direct my speech to the back students who are really concerned about this radio program, so please take it easy and you do not need to panic. So last session we dealt with the writing process. I mean the different steps that all the students should follow while writing. And here I would like to thank my colleague Mr. الدين for his helpful analysis, explanation and details about the writing process, and for his helpful pieces of advice for the student who are going to write about any subject. Today today with the help of Mr. الدين, we are going to have a flashback on some writing tips, recommendation, and we will go through some guidelines and how to deal with a test as a whole. Good evening, Mr. الدين.
Good evening, Mr. Ali, and thank you and most welcome to all our pupils and listeners for a new episode in our weekly English program for our dear students, back students mainly. So as you said in our last session, we provided you with some tips on how to produce a better pieces of writing and eventually score higher in the end of the term test and the final exam, back exam. As you mentioned, Mr. Ali, we will carry on focusing on writing, but as you know, this week our students will be sitting for the end of term test. That's why we'll try to provide some guidelines and hacks, if you can call them. These are simple yet proved to be useful while dealing with the whole test and answer the eternal question, which is how to get higher marks in exams. So for this, please take a note and a pen and try to jot down or copy these notes into your notebook to consider them later.
Okay, thank you, Mr. الدين. So you are going to deal with some tips concerning the test as a whole, or simply concerning the writing?
So we'll start with reminding you and us with the writing tips that we dealt with the last time, and as we said, we'll carry on looking at the test as a whole. So if you go back for the writing, we'll have 11 tips here. So the first one will be that you should familiarize yourself with the structure of the writing test. Here I mean you should do plenty of practice tests, preferably in timed conditions, which means preparing the same conditions as if you are in the test. This will help you look at the timing and the type of writing you are expected to produce. But don't just do them. As you know, Mr. Ali, there should be the feedback or what we call it, the peer review or correction.
Yes.
So you should use this feedback from your teachers and later with this feedback on writing and act on it so that you learn from it better. So try to rewrite. Next, you try to rewrite your work based on this feedback. So tests, if you are looking for tests, or some of our students may search for certain tests, so they are, as we all know, they are available on the net and easily accessible from any device. It is also preferable to try different sets of tests from the different corners of the country, as this variety will be reflected in the final exam, back exam test, and the student will have a clearer idea about the type of tests to expect.
Yes, Mr. Azdin, here you mean that student and back student, mainly back student, have to practice and do a lot of tests to get tests from here, from there, in order to have an idea about the different types of question, maybe?
Sure, yes. So as you know, practice makes perfect. Okay, yeah. So the more you practice, the better you will be prepared for the test, and you will not find things you have not seen before. And as you know, from region to region and from teacher to teacher, the text or the test structure varies from one to another.
Yes.
So it is better to have a general look about this difference.
Yes. Where can they find these tests, maybe, students? Maybe on the internet, or?
Yes, they are available on the internet, and we have a website which is already prepared for. We have rakkamidi.com, which is our website in which you will find some of these tests. You can just check them or check the comments below. We'll be providing the link. Mm-hmm. And as we know, they are easy to access, and also you can ask your friends or your peers or your ex-classmates. They can provide you with this tests also.
Yes, even your teacher, maybe they will provide.
Yes, they can supply you with some tests.
Different types of tests, yes.
Of course, we are already doing this, so we are supplying some extra tests for students to get practice and to have an idea about the structure of these tests, not to deal with the back exam without practice. That would be inappropriate. Should we move on to the next tip? The next tip, which is also critical, which is time management.
As you know, time management is very important. Yeah.
Yes, so time is crucial. So no one can deny that time is very crucial when it comes to tests, and unfortunately most...
And as it is known, time is as a sword.
Yes, so it can be used negatively or positively, yes. For sure. So unfortunately, in most cases, this adds more pressure and panic on the side of our students. If it is not...
So here many students say that they do not have time to do, for example, the last question or some question of the test. So what is their problem here?
So the problem, as you said, is in managing their time. So the time allotted for the test, which is 2 hours.
Yes.
This is enough. This is enough time for doing the test. So if you have 2 hours, means the tasks should be finished before that allotted time. Mm-hmm. But as we said, our students may be frustrated thinking about this time, and they will run out of time. And as we said, this may cause them or add more pressure and panic on them. Mm-hmm. Hence, for all these mentioned reasons, the pupil must have a clear plan on time management. I mean, the question here is how much time allotted should
to each section,
each part of the test be given.
Yes.
Okay. So how much time should I give to certain parts of the test? Well, to be honest, there are no secret formula, but from the general practice, we come out with a balanced way that proved to be working with most of our students. Mm-hmm. We, as you know, Mr. Ali,
yes.
Recommend or rather advise our pupils to use the 45-30-45 scheme. Here, to simplify it, 45 means 45 minutes.
Yes, it means to each part you give, for example, the first part 45, the second part 30, and then 45.
So the text structure is 3 sections or 3 parts. So
reading, comprehension, language, and writing.
Writing yes. At the end. This division of the time is also respecting the marks. So as you know, is 15
allotted
marks
to each.
for arts, for example, is 15 for comprehension,
Yes.
10 for language, and 15 for writing.
Yes.
So here we'll be having 45 minutes should be allotted to reading comprehension, to read the text and answer the related questions. 30 minutes should be also allotted to the second part, which is the language tasks, with an average of 10 minutes to each task.
Yes.
Okay. And the last part, which is writing, should be given 45 minutes. As we all know, the section is divided in two parts. So here we'll be also dividing the 45 minutes into
Between the two tasks. Yes.
two tasks. So the pre-writing, in which the student can spend up to 50.
The guided writing.
Guided writing.
Yes.
It's the pre or guided writing.
Yes.
In which here the student can spend up to 15 minutes before proceeding to the free writing or essay, which generally should be around 30 minutes.
Yes, so this is the free writing.
Yes, so that's our scheme or plan that we'll be using for time management. As we said, if you want to remind our students, 45, 30,
Yes,
45.
so here the student should give to each part of the test the time or the exact time that give them the chance to deal with this part. For example, the reading comprehension is a little bit long task, so here the student have to give 45 minutes. Okay, for the language it depends on the section. So for the arts, for example, we have 3 tasks, and for the other section we have only two tasks. So here the time is about 30 minutes. And for the last part, which is a little bit long, so we have to give at least 45 minutes to do this activity. I think that they are enough. The time is enough.
So that's enough. So as you said, for science sections it's 15 for writing tasks, and for arts is 10 minutes for each task. So for science you will have more time to think about the language tasks.
Here you are very generous for them.
Good.
Yes.
What we need to add here is last remark about this scheme or this recommendation concerning the time distribution is that it provides you with a general guideline not to run out of time here. Yet if you finish task earlier than you expect, then this will add room to you to other tasks. So this does not mean that if we have, for example, 10 minutes for task 1 in language, it must be 10 minutes.
Yes, you should not stick to the
yes, sometimes
time.
You finish, and this will give
before
you
that time.
Yes, you can get this time and invest it in writing, for example.
But I think the student have to revise in this time, in this free time, revise the task.
Yes, check again.
Yes,
check the answers. Okay, good. Next step. So from here we'll be after dealing with the time management. Now we'll be move on to check the test as a whole. So we'll be dealing with the test as a whole and general recommendations that you should consider the day of the test. We'll first start by writing the important things down when you sit down on the chair. So before getting the paper, or the first few minutes that you get the paper, you should write important things down first.
Yes, what are these important things?
So,
examples.
Here, as soon as the test starts, write down all the rules. For example, the grammar rules.
Yes.
This recommendation, the scheme that we have spoken about in writing, because the student later will be frustrated, will be thinking about the answers, will have time restriction and etc. So will not have time to remember or take consideration of this. You may forget them. So it is better to write them down in your draft before starting. So when you write down all the rules and other important information on some scratch paper before you start going through the whole or through the questions. This will help keep you from blanking when you need that information later. Blanking here, we mean you go blank. So some student will say, I forgot about it, or I did not have time to write it.
It means that he doesn't remember anything about
anything, especially, for example, if they face a difficult question or a task, or if they are running out of time. So it will be almost impossible
Yes,
to
maybe
remember.
going blank has its causes, I think. Maybe the student doesn't revise well for his test. Maybe he spent all the time revising and studying, if you like, and without thinking that tomorrow will sit for a test. Okay.
Yes, revising for the till the last minute. You mean?
Yes.
Yes. Also, they may be revising more or less. So sometimes they revise more than what is needed, or
yes.
things that will not be included. For example, memorizing paragraphs, memorizing essays, and this will add more pressure on their minds, and they will not answer properly, and this affects concentration, of course. So
what should the student do here in this case?
The case of in order to generate concentration.
Yes.
Yes. So we said concentration comes with confidence on oneself.
To be
so first,
self-confident.
Self-confident, and this confidence comes from what? It comes from preparation. When you are well prepared, you will be confident. So confidence comes from revision, from checking, from, as we said, practice, and this will give you confidence in yourself, and you will have concentration. And these steps, which, as we said, you write down important things on your draft, that will add more, make you have a plan, a clear plan, a clear map ahead, okay? And avoid any surprises which can occur.
Yes, the next step.
Next, point number 4, which is read the whole test and start with the easiest tasks. This is very important, especially for our students, which are mostly average students. So sometimes they are stuck in one question, and they waste.
They spend all the time on that question. Okay. So they have to start with the easiest question.
For sure, yes. So you must have 5 minutes to skim through the whole test and have an idea about what you will deal with, as this will help.
So when you said the whole test, you mean all the parts of the test?
All the parts of the test. So the first few minutes, you just have a quick look at the test, the structure of the test. Means this is very useful later in time management and how to divide your efforts and your answers in general. Okay, so you must have a general idea about the test, then you can deal with it. So we said this helps you when it comes to time management. So you know exactly which tasks requires more time to invest on them, which tasks are easy, so you can answer them just in 1 minute, for example. So you can quickly do it.
Yes.
And the important point is that you should start with these easy tasks. So from the easiest to the hardest tasks, that's the flow of your work should be. For example, in reading comprehension, some questions that are easier than others. Okay, so for example, when it comes to paraphrase or summary of the text, it requires more time and requires more concentration. But correcting, for example, false, true, or ticking the type of text, or filling in a table, that's does not require too much time.
Yes.
Good. So far so good. Let's move on to point 5, which is related to point 4. As we said, some questions are easy, others are difficult. So if you find, or if you are facing a difficult question, your reaction must be to skip it. So you should rather skip it and move on to another question.
Yes, you skip it totally, or what should we do?
No, you skip it for the easiest question. It's not totally. So if you come across hard task or question, you should not panic. Just skip it and come back to it when you have...
And look for the other question.
When you are done with other ones. So here you must consider the mark allotted to that question and the time you will invest on it. For example, don't spend 10 minutes on a question which is half a mark. Sometimes students spend 10 minutes just in a question which is half a mark. So example here we have synonyms, reference questions in the comprehension. So they spend 10 minutes reading the text, the whole text, and
reading
again, and so wasting 10 minutes, which could be invested in writing or in language, and that will affect our scheme that we mentioned at the beginning, which is 45, 30,
Yes.
45, that will not set this balance. So they will have an imbalance, and this imbalance, of course, will affect the mark overall, okay,
Yes.
the overall mark.
Yes.
Let's move on to point 6.
Yes.
So here also you must, when dealing with the test, you should look for clues in the other questions. This is what we call overlapping.
Yes.
Overlapping questions. So generally they are avoided, but if you are having 6 or 7 questions about one text, you cannot avoid this overlapping. So some questions or some answers will help you on the next
To answer the other question.
Yes, some question answer other question, or just give you clues to the correct answer.
Yes.
Okay? Sometimes, as we said, the answer to a question can be contained within or hinted at in another question on the test. So you must look at other answers or questions to help jog your memory, or sometimes the efforts that you spend to extract the information, for example, to fill in the table. This information or this data could be used again in answering other questions, for example, true, false, or sometimes if you have spent 5 or 7 minutes reading the text in order to answer question 1 or question 2, you can use this reading and what you have understood from this reading later to answer another question, and do not need to reread the text again. Welcome again.
Welcome again. So in the first part of this session, we talked a lot about the tips that we should, or what that the student have to follow while dealing with their test, or the English test. Okay, let's carry on, Mr. Azdin.
So we have dealt with the 6 tips. Now we'll move on to the 7th one.
Yes.
Which is you should understand the questions well before providing the answer.
Yes, here some pupils or some students do not understand the question at all. Okay, and this is the problem of some of students, because they do not read the question in the right way. So the student should read the question, reread the question until they understand, and in this case they will know automatically the answer.
Yes, Ms. Ali, as
Yes.
you know, as the Arabic proverbs say, the question is half the answer.
Yes.
So that's why if you don't get what is asked from you, or you don't understand what is demanded from you, it will be impossible to provide the needed answer.
Yes.
So if you have 2 people speaking 2 different languages, it will be impossible to understand each other. So that's what we always recommend or advise our students to do before rushing into the answer. First, understand the question, read the question well, and each question has a different structure. So when you read, for example, reading comprehension questions, it's not the same as the language, as writing, as the topic. So each question deserves to be treated separately, and to invest the time you invest in understanding this question will be back. You will get it back later when you answer, because the answer will come easily.
Yes.
Okay, if you understand it. Good.
Yes.
So here we can take some example of questions. How to understand certain questions, like as we said in the reading comprehension. For example, correct the false statements
Yes.
with details from the text. So here we are asked, for example, to provide details. If you correct it without these details, means your answer will not be considered.
That's correct. Yes.
So that's some students neglect it, and they just rush.
Yes, sometimes the student answer the question, or read the statement and write it again, and they think that they have answered the question.
Yes, by adding note, for
Without
example.
providing details from the text.
Yes. This can be also applicable in the midterm test, the listening test. So you should complete, for example, or answer the listening comprehension from the passage.
Yes.
As we notice, some students, they just try to answer these questions from general knowledge and do not use details. Okay, so this one example. Also, for example, in
What about WH questions?
yes, that's what we'll speak about. For example, if the question is what are the negative effects of technology. So here the students, for example, is obliged to provide how many effects. Can he provide just one? The question, what are?
What are? So here, one, it's not enough, I think.
Yes, one is not enough. So if it is one, means the person who made the test would ask you what is. So there are differences here, what is or what are. So this is a good example of the structure of questions. So it gives you part of the answer. So now you know that you have just one thing to talk about. Negative means something, or drawbacks or disadvantages of technology means you must provide negative.
Only
things.
negative.
Yes, only negative. Yes. So that's just one example, and we have dealt the last session or episode about writing. You can just check it. Good. Let's move on to the 8th point, which is use the adequate techniques that we learned in class. Here I mean the writing process. For example, when you deal with writing tasks, you should use what we have spoken about, the writing process. Okay, the 6 steps of the writing process. When dealing with language, for example, you should use the 3.
Yes, what about here? If a student say that maybe I will lose too much time while making this plan or this writing process. So I mean that a student like to write directly without making this plan.
Yes, this means that they may be finishing early, but their writing or their drafts cannot be a piece of writing because, as you know, no one writes perfect piece of writing the first time. So it's almost impossible that the writing will be out of or without mistakes. And if the writing is full of mistakes and the structure and maybe the content itself, the adherence to the topic and the mechanics will not be observed well. So it is better to follow this process. And as you said, concerning the time,
it makes it easier for the student to write.
Yes, to have a clear way, okay, to pave the way for writing.
So it's like a map, as we said. Huh?
It's a map. So the time you invest in this process will be recovered later when you write, because you will have a map in front of you, so it will be easier to organize your writing and make it more coherent, more cohesive, and later you will have time to check it in terms of mechanics, punctuation, capitalization.
That's about any mistakes.
We'll consider all this. So because you have a plan concerning the arguments, for example, you do not have to think while writing, no need to think about which arguments you will use, what arguments you have mentioned or not, because you have a clear plan or outline in front of you. So don't worry about time, just follow this.
So maybe the student come to the exam with a ready-made structure or a ready-made expression or sometimes ready-made paragraphs, and they like to jot it down and to brush it in their writing, but sometimes it cannot be considered as true.
Yes, because each topic has specific
information,
general structure of the writing that will be cohesive to this or coherent to this topic. Okay. So as we said here, also the writing process in the first term, for example, or the first weeks when you practice, it will be a little bit difficult to observe all these steps in that short period of time. But with practice, as you know, things will become much easier and it will become a habit after. If you start it at an early time, it will become a habit and will not take you more than 5 minutes to just generate ideas, organize them, and start writing your draft. Okay? So that's that for the writing tasks. Also for language, there are things that you should or you can use, which we call them the 3 SFM, or SFM stands for structure, form, and meaning. So if you have any blank to fill in, you should first think about the structure of the sentence, subject, verb, and object. So that's the structure, what we mean.
And you look for what does each sentence need in this blank.
Yes.
Whether a subject, a verb, or an object.
Yes, sometimes it helps. Okay. So if structure gives you more than one alternative, so for example, if we need a verb, he plays, reads books. We have 2 verbs in this context, so you need to move on to the form. You can use the form. The form here means noun or verb, and the noun can be
or adjective. Or
yes, we'll come to this.
Yes.
The noun and the verb. The noun and the verb, because the noun can be modified only by adjectives, and adjective can be modified only by adverbs. So adverb, adjective, and noun. If you have a verb, then it can be modified by an adverb. So these are the two rules for the form. If form gives you more than one...
So you mean that verbs are modified by adverbs, and nouns are modified by adjectives.
Adjectives, yes, good. And the verb is modified by adverb. So there is no other formula here. If the form gives you more than one alternative, for example, if we have my mother is new, young. In this context, new, young is adjective. So both of them, they are adjectives. So we cannot use form and we cannot use the structure. So we need to move on to the meaning.
Yes.
The meaning here will be the last criteria you will use, and it will solve any question or any task you are looking for the answer. So meaning, for example, we have taken the example, my mother is new and young, so it can only be young. So we cannot use the adjective new. So now you, with this technique you have answered the question and you are sure that your answer is correct.
Yes, what are the techniques? Could you repeat them, Mr. Azdin? So we have...
writing process, the 6 steps of the writing process for writing.
Yes.
And the 3 SFM or 3 keys, structure, form, and meaning.
Structure, S, structure, F, form, and M, meaning. Yes, this is in language tasks.
Language tasks,
okay,
good. For comprehension, also there are certain techniques you should use. So other techniques we can use, for example, to answer true, false statement or correct the false statements. This question, for example, you need to focus on the sentence, point out or single out which part of the sentence is false, because the sentence is not totally or completely false. So some students try to change the whole sentence or change the meaning of the sentence.
Paraphrase the sentence or...
No, so you must focus on, read the sentence and focus on which part is false. For example, if the question asks, John is 59 years old and John is 60. So in this context, John is aged. All of this is correct and correct in the text. What is false is just the age, the number. Okay? So 59, we change it with 60. So the student must first locate or which part of the sentence is false.
Is false, yes.
Do not try to correct the whole sentence, okay? Because
in some question like this, the students are very lucky because they are given the number of paragraphs.
Yes.
Most of the time,
redirected to certain paragraphs.
So it means they go directly to the paragraph.
Yes, sure.
Yes,
sure. Next step, which is proofreading or checking your answers. This generally after you finish your test.
So this is the last step, I think.
So when you have finished, normally you check your answer. This can be when you finish a task or when you finish the whole test. So you check the task when you finish it, and at the end you have a whole checking for all your answer.
Yes.
How can we proofread, Mr. Ali?
Proofreading, you mean here, it means to read again what you have written in your test and check whether there are some mistakes, some missing words, etc.
Structure to
change. Forms to change, etc. Okay, so and here I think the student to win the time, as it is said, for example, they have to check each part by itself. I mean, when they finish doing the comprehension task, they have to check all the question in the comprehension, then move to the language, do the language and check the language, and then the last part, which is writing, do the writing task and then check it.
Good, that's it. So let's move on to the next tip, which is never leave questions blank. That's another important recommendation.
That means the student have to do all the questions.
Yes, so never leave questions blanks or leave blanks in your test, unless you are docked for incorrect answers. So sometimes you have doubts about certain answers and it's hard to answer them, or they may take you a long period of time. So that's an exception. So never just leave a question blank. Sometimes, for example, in circling the correct alternative. So in this questions. The excellent students, of course, they will use the technique that we have talked about, the SFM.
Yes.
So, but other students, sometimes they will be reluctant or they could not find the correct answer. And it is recommended not to leave any blank, because here we may be playing on luck.
Yes.
So in some situations you have nothing to lose, but you may have something to win,
to get
or to gain. Okay, sometimes they have luck, and half a mark is very important, especially in the back exam. So you have nothing to lose, just circle.
Maybe by chance they will get it by the
Yes.
chance.
So we notice it sometimes. Students who are reluctant, they leave it blank. And if they circle some of these words, they may match certain answers. In this context is fortunately, but during the year they should learn how to get the correct answer using the techniques we mentioned before. Good?
Yes. Yes. Do you have any other tip to...
So with this we have finished. We still have just one tip, which is very important here. The last step, the physical preparation, which is very important as the theoretical preparation. So before the test, have a good sleep the night before the test and drink enough water.
It means don't revise till the last time.
Minute.
Yes,
Till
the last minute.
Yes, till the last minute. So have enough sleep in order in the morning to come ready and to have a fresh mind and be ready for the challenges you will find in the test. So someone who is asleep, it will be very hard to concentrate and to provide something plausible or something which could be within the test or within the topic if you are writing. Also, you must, as we said, you must drink enough water in order to be, as many studies show, that getting dehydrated during a test can be distracting or reduce your ability to think clearly if your mind requires something else like water, like breakfast. If you come to class or to the test without breakfast, your mind will be thinking about other necessity, and concentration will be very hard to get in this context. So be well prepared physically and mentally, and theoretically also with the knowledge you are equipped with during the whole year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Azdin. I think the student, while they are coping with the exam, they should relax, take it easy, concentrate, and focus only on that test. Do not think about the other test or about the marks of the other test. Okay, so these are some of the tips that you should follow while you are dealing with any test. I think it's not only in the English test, but it's a general...
in all the tests, yes.
Yes, in all the tests. Okay.
That's what we can learn also from other subjects. So if you have any other recommendation from your other subject teachers, so it will be useful also to implement and use in any other tests. So hopefully you follow these tips, and hopefully everything will go smoothly and right.
Okay, today we do not do any practice. Maybe we talk too much today. Okay, Mr. Azdin. But I think these tips are helpful and they are useful if they are followed by the students. Okay, till we meet again, I would like to thank you for your attention. I hope for you good marks in your tests, and see you again. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Good luck.
So see you in next episode.
Thank you, Mr. Azdin.